All right, everybody. I think we can go ahead and get this meeting started for the MAG Standard Specifications and Detail Committee, February 7th, 2024. I want to thank everybody for your attendance. I see we have quite a few online viewers. I appreciate that. We have a few in here as well, including some industry. We have Neenah Foundry here as well. They have a few attendees. So we went ahead and got everybody checked off that's on. If you pop in, if somebody else pops in, we'll check them off as well. We'll go ahead and start with the call to the audience. Real quick, do we have any online visitors?
Noah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, yes, yeah. My name's Noah Hanley. I'm a project engineer with Nyloplast, which is a division of Advanced Drainage Systems. I'm stepping in for Nick Burton today. He had a conflict with his schedule, so I'll be assisting and answering any questions regarding Nyloplast structures.
Thank you.
And I also have an M. Jones. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Mr. Jones, calling Mr. Jones.
You're still muted. That could be an issue. I think that's the only new people on the call today.
All right. Thank you, Gordon. Maybe Mr. Jones will get his microphone. We can get an introduction, see who he's with when he gets that up and running. All right, we'll go ahead and start with agenda item number 2, the call of the audience. An opportunity will be provided to the members of the public to address the Standard Specifications and Detail Committee on items that are not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of MAG, or on items on the agenda for discussion but not for action. Members of the public who are attending the meeting in person are asked to fill out a comment card and provide it to the MAG staff. Those attending virtually are provided the option of submitting written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website at azmag.gov/comment and indicate for which meeting the comment is intended. Comments must be received at least 2 hours prior to the posted start time for the meeting. Comments received by the deadline will be provided to the members of the committee in advance of the meeting. If comments are received after the deadline, comments will need to be resubmitted prior to the next meeting of the committee. Comments must not exceed 3 minutes in length. A total of 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the Standard Specification and Detail Committee or chair requests an exception to this limit. Gordon, have we received any comments?
We have not received any comments online.
No comments received. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, the approval of January 10th, 2024 meeting minutes. Hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to go through the meeting minutes. They were sent out earlier. If you need a moment to refresh your memory, please do. And these meeting minutes were summarized. Is that fair to say? I believe that's fair to say, Gordon.
Yeah,
they were summarized
as best as possible. There's still a lot. We had it was over 2 hours long, so there's still quite a bit here.
With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Jose approves. You got a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Craig. With that, we can move to a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Let's start from the back to front. This time, Youngtown. Youngtown on yet? Tempe? Tempe, are you on?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Thank you.
So it takes a while to unmute.
City of Surprise? Scottsdale?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Phoenix?
Yes.
Yes.
2 yeses. Good job. Peoria?
Yes.
Mesa?
Yes.
Maricopa County?
Here we go. Yes.
Thank you. Goodyear?
Yes.
Glendale?
Yes.
Gilbert?
Yes.
El Mirage?
Yes.
Chandler?
Yes.
Buckeye?
Buckeyes, yes.
And Avondale?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion was passed unanimously.
Thank you, everybody. I hope I didn't surprise you, or I apologize if I did surprise you going backwards. I have asked.
Good afternoon.
Good
Wanted to
afternoon.
make sure my audio was working in case I'm missing something.
And is this Mr. Jones? Or who is this? Okay. There's obviously some technical difficulty. Back to surprises. I apologize for the surprise going backwards. I've asked Gordon to randomize or to mix it up a little bit with the roll calling and the voting and whatnot. That way it's not the same person. It's not Jim going first and Youngtown going last. So we get to mix it up a little bit. So when we do get to vote, just keep that in mind. Maybe have your microphone ready to go. All right, we're going to move into agenda item number 4. This is for manhole frame and cover design and manufacturing. We have some attendees from Neenah Foundry who are going to do a presentation for their manufacturing technologies and for these frames and covers. So we'll go ahead and give them an introduction. Who's going to run the Joe? Is that Joe Fowl?
Folly.
Fowley?
Yep.
We'll run the presentation and we'll go from there. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks everybody for entertaining our proposal today from Neenah Foundry. So real quick, my name is Joe Foley. I'm the Director of Product Development and Engineering for Neenah. Been with the company about 8 years, and I'm responsible for all the product design, working with the foundry, manufacturing, and things like that. So if you want to hit the next slide, I'll just go through our agenda. We'll go quickly through our proposal summary of what we would like to see potentially change within the specification. Talk a little bit about our performance-based design and how casting design has changed and manufacturing has changed over the years. So we'll talk about the history, modern casting design, or how we design castings now, some examples of castings that we've done this to across the country, and then wrap that up with some common misconceptions about lighter weight castings. And then we'll talk a little bit about the specifics as related to the MAG standards with existing castings, or proposed castings, load rating, theft and dislodging, and then summary, and then I'll leave a little bit of time for questions. So we can go into the next slide. So our proposal summary is several different things. The biggest one is to remove the weight requirements and tolerances. Weight does not equal strength in the design of a manhole cover or frame. So that's kind of the reason for that. We'd like to have a minimum load rating added to the standard. Right now, everything is based on weight, and there is no load rating standard. H25 would be the proposal there. We'd like to remove the ribs from the bottom of the covers. Current design and current standard has support ribs on the bottom of the covers, and I'll go into why that's actually not as good as a flat cover. There'll be some revisions to dimensional requirements. allow for CNC lettering. So on specialty lids, can we get away with machining lettering in rather than as casting it for like one-offs type of things? Not as big of a deal. And then revise the drawings to reflect these changes. Next slide. So historically, gray iron casting design, everything was designed with very thick metal walls. Ribs were placed on the bottom of manhole covers because the thought process was if I have ribs, much like a beam, I have a stronger product. Reasons for heavier castings, there was less manufacturing and process control. We use a lot of different technologies now to control our pour temps and times, and the design, the sand is more consistent to how we make our molds. It was a lot easier to err on the side of caution. And the thing that they didn't have 50, 100 years ago was no computer simulation software. So we do finite element analysis on a lot of our products or most of our products in the design process. So with modern casting design or performance-based design, instead of focusing so much on how heavy something is, let's focus on the performance. So do we need to make something that weighs 300 pounds or is 180 pound equivalent the same thing? And what we found over time and through multiple tests is that that is the case. So it's allowed us to reduce weight on castings without sacrificing any performance. We've done both physical load testing in conjunction with the FEA analysis. And we've correlated those two so it allows us to better predict designs. We found that lids without ribs are actually stronger. And I'll go into that a little bit. A lot of that has to do with stress concentrations. And then reduced weight equals reduced energy use, raw material use, reduced fuel for transportation, and reduces potential for work-related injuries in the field. So the design process explained the way we design castings now used to hand draft everything, draw it up, pattern maker would build the tool. What we're doing now is we use a 3D CAD model, design everything, predict the weights with the CAD model. That 3D CAD model is then used to CNC cut the pattern that we use to make the casting. So it's no longer a guy on a workbench with wood and stuff. Everything is more precise. We also conduct finite element analysis. So this is an iterative process where we'll play with the weights in the computer, and what it's allowed us to do is really optimize the design with little cost up front. So instead of having to make prototypes, I can get really close with my my FEA before I have to go forward and actually make castings, because tooling is expensive. And then when we do actually make the castings, we verify everything through a physical load test. So we have a load testing facility at Neenah Foundry. We have one at our facility in Medley, Florida. And then if third-party results are required, we use the University of Wisconsin. The further design process, we use what's called mold flow analysis software to determine how we're going to fill the casting. So years back, part of the reason they did heavier section castings is they didn't run into problems with freezing the iron before it got to the end of the filling. So we have software, computational fluid dynamics software that we use today, and allows us to predict that flow. It also allows us to predict solidification, if we're going to have stress cracks in the process. So it allows us to more precisely design our products rather than just erring on the side of caution. And then at the bottom there, second part is the physical load test. So that's our load test machine in Neenah. And we are capable at Neenah pressing up to 200,000 pounds of force. We follow AASHTO M306. So for anything in the roadway, in any part of the country, AASHTO M306 would be the main standard. We can also do FAA standards and European standard testing if required. Some examples of performance-based design. So in 2012, Neenah made a big push to start weight reduction in castings because we had the FEA software and we could start predicting things now. So these are some examples of castings that we have around the country, mainly Minnesota, Illinois. The 1750C is an electrical utility standard, so that's used all over the country by AT&T, power companies, things like that. And then the 1739 is a standard in Missouri. And what you'll notice is how much weight we were able to take out of those castings. So the first one, you went from 154 to 126. We didn't sacrifice any performance. Same with the lid. We dropped it 40 pounds, no performance characteristics. I know one of the concerns, and we can talk about this more, was covers coming up due to traffic. The 1642 and the 1713/1015, we have well over 50,000, probably over 200,000 of those in various states in place without any documented instances. And then, so the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois use the 1713. And we provide probably 50% of the volume to the city of Chicago. And the 1642 is heavily used in Minnesota. So we've been able to greatly reduce the weight, which has allowed us to ship more on a truck, which reduces greenhouse gas emissions, allows us to use less raw material, less energy consumption, and just on down the line. An example in this area is Jensen precast interceptor lids. These are similar in size to the MAG standard. So there's a 24-inch lid that weighs 103 pounds that Jensen uses, and then a 32-inch lid. That one weighs 252 pounds, but there's no ribs on either of these lids. That's a point to make. These lids don't have any support ribs underneath. So some common misconceptions, like covers fly off in traffic. We provide our castings with gaskets or machine sparing surfaces, so we haven't really had that as an issue. Like I said, there's over 200,000 of the 1642, 1713s in service, and we've not had anything at least brought to our attention that anything has happened with those castings. Another misconception is light frames and covers are not as strong. That's simply not true. A lid, if we take a look at this lid here that has ribs on the bottom, this will fail at less load than will the lid without the ribs, because you're concentrating all the stress in these ribs, and that's where your crack is going to occur. Here I can distribute it over the entire bottom of the lid. So not only did I make this lighter, but I made it stronger. And then the theft risk. In general, if a thief can steal it, they'll steal it. Whether it's 120 pounds or 160 pounds, we've found that they want it, they're going to take it. Theft isn't as big of an issue now as it was, and I don't know about this specific area. In Chicago, I've heard they've replaced something like 80 covers a year due to theft, from what they can tell. And with what happened in 2007, 2008, most of the salvage yards now, when they see covers come in, unless it's like a contractor bringing something in or a city, they're starting to question it. So hopefully that tide has stemmed a little bit. So this is an example. This is this is a Chicago standard, and Minnesota uses this. So this is the 1642. That lid weighs about 120 pounds, and we've not had any issues with that product. So your current standards, you have a 24-inch, and we're just going to use 24-inch manhole and 20 and 30, which is the clear opening. Your current frame and current lid combined weight, or frame weight is 180 and the lid weight is 188. One of the things we noticed, you have a plus or minus 2% variance in the weight. That is really difficult to do with casting. Plus or minus 5 is the AASHTO standard. Plus or minus 2% is because of the density of iron. If you have an area that had a sticker or something weird like that, can throw that plus or minus 2% off pretty quick. So that's a little bit of a area that we'd like to see change. Lettering required is what's called raised flush. So it's raised lettering, but flush with the surface. And then we use same tooling for both watertight and non-watertight versions. The next slide, the 30-inch cover, very similar, 227 pounds for the frame and 210 pounds for the lid. And we'd like to see some weight reduction in these as well. So our proposal with the 24-inch would go from a 180-pound frame to a 108-pound frame. And I can pass this around for the people in the room. The first one I'll pass around would be the existing sample of the existing frame and what it would look like. And this would be the proposed. So you're not going to notice too much of a difference with those, except the wall thickness is really what changes. All the critical dimensions are the same. The current lid weighs 188 pounds. We'd like to get that down to about 122 based on our models. And I'll pass those around as well so you can see on the bottom of this lid, we have all the ribs. On the proposed lid, we have no ribs and are reducing it by about 66 pounds. We'd also propose that we remove the plus or minus 2% variance on weight and even potentially remove the weight requirement entirely and base it basically based on load rating rather than weight, base it on performance. Like I said before, the allowance potentially of engraved letters. That's not a be all end all. That was just kind of, if we can do it for lower volume products, it helps the manufacturing process. And then we propose using H25 through the ASHRAE 306 standard as the load rating standard, as that seems to be what more municipalities and governments are going towards. H20 was the standard for years. Now we're switching to H20. Similarly, on the next slide with the 30-inch, we'd be looking at a 72-pound difference on the frame. And I'll pass those around as well. This one, you'll see a little bit of a variance in how it looks physically. Again, critical dimensions are the same. And then we don't get a ton of weight reduction out of the lid. We're only dropping about 20 pounds to hit that load rating. So we're going to go, from 210 to 190. But again, like the other one, taking the ribs off the bottom. The remainder of the items would stay the same.
Is this so you can pick it up off the ground?
The stacking lugs, yeah, and for shipping. So if we just ship them on skids, if you don't have those on there, you can't pick one off. You're kind of stuck.
Because an upside down manhole cover can be a challenge to get.
It is. Yep.
Especially old ones. Now, do you know that? As a contractor, I've actually had agencies come out with scales and weigh my manholes and rings and covers. Believe it or not. And I know a particular inspector that's retired that is turning over in his grave right now. Listening to lighting, making them lighter. What's the assertion? Is it a guarantee? I mean, physics or physics or?
Yeah, we would guarantee that this would meet the load rating required. There's, our warranty would apply and we would sign off on, I don't have a license in Arizona, but I've stamped stuff as a PE in Wisconsin. We stand behind the product. So we're not going to try and sell something that doesn't meet load rating because that does nobody any good. So going into load rating calculations, just to explain how we do this. So our objective would be to determine if the proposed 24 and 30-inch covers meet H25 loading, and then determine the ultimate load at failure. So typically what we'll do is we will both in the FEA on the computer and in real practice, take it to an ultimate failure load. So we use finite element analysis software to do that. I can go into all the details here, but I'll kind of breeze over it. But basically we're looking at all the different stresses that are in the occurring in the product. And then we look at the critical stretch being von Mises and tensile stress, which is really where cast iron is going to fail. Cast iron won't fail in compression. It's about 3.5 to 4 times stronger in compression than it is in tension, so we don't really worry about compression. And then we compare the critical stresses to the ultimate stress of the material at critical support locations to determine if it's going to fail. Parameters, we use cast gray iron ASTM A48 class 35B, so that has a tensile strength of 35,000 PSI. Max tensile stress that we start looking at is 35,000, and then that's where loading would cause failure. We're a proof load of 50,000 pounds, so that's the AASHTO standard, 2.5 times the rated wheel load of 20,000 pounds, and then a 9-inch by 9-inch contact area, which is also the AASHTO standard. So we go through and we do the 3D analysis, CAD analysis. We completed simulations on all 4 of the currently designed products. And we use the frame and the lid as a combination setup. Like I said, the frames, I cannot break frames at my facility in Neenah. I have to take them to Madison because my press isn't strong enough. So typically frames will break around 400,000 pounds. So I'm never really concerned about frames unless you're doing some weird design. But the bottom line here is looking at existing versus proposed. So the existing 24-inch cover does meet H25. It's got a max load rating of 20,000 pounds and a failure load of 70,000. So at 70,000 on the 24-inch cover in both scenarios is when we would expect that to fail. And we've proven this through the FEA analysis and actual physical testing. Your existing 30-inch frame and cover as designed in the standard does not meet H25. And if we were to load rate that casting, we would rate it at 12,000 pounds. So we always throw a safety factor of 2.5 on the load rating. So really that product wouldn't even meet H20. H20 would be a 16,000 pound wheel load or a 40,000 pound proof load test. And we've actually broken that casting and we've looked at it in the lab and on FEA, and it breaks below the 40,000 pounds as it's designed in the current MAG standard. So our proposed 30-inch cover would have a max load rating of 20,000 pounds and a failure load of around 60. So in the case of the 30-inch, we're reducing the weight by 20 pounds on the lid, but we're actually gaining strength by how we're designing it. Real quick, theft and dislodging, we talked about that. Again, dislodging, we haven't really seen any issues with that on the products that we've done this to. And the examples that I gave you are just a few of the examples. We have products all over the country that we've taken weight out like this. Last slide here. So in summary, our proposal would be to reduce the weight of the castings while still keeping the same loading. Remove the weight requirement from the standard potentially, and if not removing the weight requirement, at least widen the range. Require all new castings to carry an H25 load rating. Allow for engraved lettering for small quantities. If it's not like a city standard, somebody wants something weird, we could maybe engrave the lettering. Remove the requirement for lids. So the drawings that you have currently show ribs on the bottom. If we could remove that requirement and allow us to design differently, would be beneficial. And then remove dimensional requirements on metal wall thicknesses specifically. So there's metal wall thickness requirements within the standard now that we'd like removed so that we can base it on performance. And then we would demonstrate through the ultimate demonstration should still be through physical load testing. We do our design with the FEA, but that's more of an internal thing. You would still want to verify that, yeah, what you're getting is going to meet the load rating. So that's basically a summary of what we're proposing. And I guess I'll open it up for questions.
So I'll start off. Thank you
You're welcome.
for the presentation. It's much appreciated. I like seeing the different technologies, and I appreciate the attention to finite resources and the fact, you're lighting them up, helping with that. There are obviously some concerns from others that'll go along with that. And one question I have right off the bat is, unless my math is off, it appears that the 24-inch lid is 35% lighter than the current lid, where the 30-inch lid is only 10% lighter than the current weight. What's behind that? Why such a spread in the percentage?
It's the span that we're making. So on the smaller, shorter span, I'm using relatively close to the same metal wall thickness. So roughly, we'll call it an inch or so. That's really all I can get down to on that 32-inch. And your current 32-inch is actually relatively light from comparing it to others with ribs. So it's really related to the geometry of the part and the span that we're making across the hole, which is why we can take that much weight out. And it's the modeling shows us that because your ribs are the rib design on that one too is quite a bit different. It's got a circle in the middle, so that's kind of where we're getting a lot of that weight
Okay.
reduction.
So it's not a misprint.
Nope,
Okay.
it is not.
The other concern that I have is the dislodging, obviously, you know, that's gonna come up. I'll just be frank, with Glendale Avenue, we had PCCP, 9 inches of PCCP on top of cement treated base, and the rebound or the frequency at which it rebounds, we were dislodging lids. Now, I don't know who the supplier was on those lids. And if I did, I wouldn't share that, but we were having to go back and pick lids up. I don't know if you could have a deeper skirt to help with that. We ended up we got in touch with Texas. Our city engineer originated in Texas, and he was able to do some networking with the current city engineer. They use a lot of PCCP, and they found that you would have to isolate. You couldn't cast it in the PCCP. You have to isolate it. So you didn't have that load transfer as strong through it.
So you were having your current weighted lids?
Yeah,
lift up?
that's correct. And that's the only place that I personally have seen them dislodge
Okay.
was on the PCCP and the cement treated base.
Yeah, so one of the things that you can do in a situation like that, and we've done this in areas, is look for we have different types of restraint systems too, that they're not, you don't necessarily have to go to full bolting, but we do have locks that come around the bottom of the frame that wouldn't allow it to pop out. So that is an option if you have areas where, oh man, just the way this road is, the speed, the design of the pavement, whatever the case may be, we do have options to help with that. In either case, whether you decide, well, we don't like your lightweight lids, we want to stick to a heavier lid, even if it's still coming out, it might be something you want to take a look at with some sort of restraint type system on the bottom of the cover.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying on the restraints. I know we have the bolt down type, which are a challenge in themselves when you have to
Yeah, and a lot of the issues we see with bolting in traffic is when you have side to side motion like this,
Yep.
it tends to work the bolts out, and which is just physics, it just happens. But then once that becomes loose, what happens is now it's pounding against there and it kind of mushes the threads together. And a lot of times you end up snapping the head of the bolt off to get the casting out. But we do have different types of locks that go underneath the frame. So on one side of the lid, you might have a fixed lug, and on the other side of the lid, you'll have a lock that turns. And it's not perfectly tight up against there. It doesn't have to be, but it doesn't allow the lid to pop out of the ground.
So one of the things that we would have to look at is how that interacts with the odor control devices that we would use on like a sewer manhole, and if there's any effect there. But
yeah, we'd definitely be willing to sit down with anybody in MAG or individually as a municipality and go through your unique challenges and see what we can come up with.
so dislodgement is one of my personal concerns. I know you addressed that in your PowerPoint presentation. I appreciate that, but I'll open up this to more questions from the committee.
I guess.
Yeah, just Jim Battlewitch with Avondale. So I'm all in favor of modernizing and you know, trying to make things better. But again, weight and the ability of these things now to come off, you know, because of the negative pressure from trucks going over or bouncing. And the other thing is that what municipalities really got to worry about is vandalism, meaning theft. You know, regardless of considering a scrap value, you know, just you know, people stealing it just for kicks, and then the city has a huge liability. So I'm against having no weight limits. I think you got to have some weight limits, minimums. But again, that's just my concern, is that, you know, how easy are these going to be to steal? Because that's a concern all agencies should be worried about. You know, I'm just amazed at the type of vandalism and stuff we have, you know, in the public parks and stuff. It's mind boggling, and just, I don't know where this comes from, but it's sad. But, you know, agencies got to look out for stuff like this. So that's my concern, is, you know, I don't want to make these too light. I would like to see maybe, if you know, I think a rate reduction would be good, but I would like to still see an option for, say, heavy duty or a certain weight class instead of just having one weight, you know, maybe having an alternate or a city, if they wanted to require a heavier lid, you know, they have that ability to do that. So that's all the comments I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jim. I can appreciate that. And I have a tendency to agree with some of what you said or most of what you said. We experienced the same thing. That's why we moved away from aluminum manhole lids, right? I don't even know if those are still used. I haven't seen one go in, and I think our last one was stolen about 2 decades ago on Glen and 56th, but
Speaking of the locking system, are you familiar with aluminum manhole lids, how they work?
I haven't seen an aluminum, like a manhole lid in the street. I've seen aluminum covers.
Oh, we
on
had
the
them
side,
here
but-
in the street. They
Okay.
didn't last long.
Okay, yeah, kind of figured they
But they
would.
had a locking mechanism with the 5-star wrench. Remember those? Like, you didn't have the wrench, you couldn't get the manhole lid off.
yeah, it was a pen ahead, I think.
Yeah.
Issue with locking type styles like that.
So we're seeing the same thing. He mentioned, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name, who was on the.
That was Jim Badovich.
Yeah.
We've seen the same issue with vandalism and theft just for fun. We're dealing with some customers right now that have technology stuff in the ground, you know, telecommunications type companies, and they're actually going to hire security covers with locks, like physical locks in the cover that we've designed for them.
Well, and to
And
Jim's
so
point,
I do understand that. So if weight can be a deterrent, I don't just deny that, because if you can't pick it up, you can't steal it. And there are restraint systems, but you know, guys get into those too. The other thing though would be like if the cover was more of the concern, we could maybe just look at the frames and taking the weight out of the frame, because that's part that is in the ground. And maybe you say, hey, we're not ready for the weight on the cover, or we'd like to keep it a little heavier than you're showing. The biggest thing I'd like to do on the frames, even if your weight doesn't go down or we don't go down as far, would be to get rid of the ribs, because I think you'll get a better product regardless of weight. It'll be a stronger product, and it's actually easier to manufacture. It's easier to ship. But if we could do the frames, you know, that's where your biggest weight savings actually comes into play too.
based on what you provided, your brakes or your I guess it would be dead load or whatever weight
Yep.
you're putting on it. Based on those numbers, yeah, you are getting I'm seeing a stronger
Correct.
lid. But, you know, to Jim's point, I would be hesitant to do something like this and without, you know, we could potentially be opening up another problem, and that would be excessive theft with the lighter lid. So thank you, Jim, for your input on that.
Well, and just to add to that, you know, I mean, lockdown or bolt down lids aren't the answer either, because, you know, we've tried that in certain applications, and the problem is that, you know, when you need it in emergency, you know, like you said, the bolt breaks off, the key doesn't work. It's just, you know, it's just another nuisance. And I know from talking to Public Works Department, they want to minimize having to get to bolt down lids and stuff. I mean, we may be headed that way, but I don't want this to force the issue, or, you know, now we got lids that are too light, so now we got to start having them bolt down. So I don't want to get forced into that.
Yeah,
into that
and
issue.
it's just another thing to go wrong with the bolt down lid. I agree.
But yeah, I mean, maybe we just focus on the frames then from a weight reduction at this point. And
I mean, maybe there is some rate reduction, but, you know, I want to see some kind of study where it's where you know, say 90% of the population cannot, you know, one man alone cannot lift the lid. You know, obviously if you've got 2 or 3 people, they might be able to do it, but, you know, it's just, you know, again, weight is a deterrent. You know, you can't deny that. So.
Sure, I got some questions.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Questions/comments. I guess my first question is related to cost. I heard reduction of materials. I've heard simplifying manufacturing. What cost savings would you expect for the industry to realize by making these changes? You said you're manufacturing these other places, so you certainly know what the cost of the revised product is versus the current product. What would we expect on that?
So I'm not gonna get into cost because cost and price are two different things, I guess. I mean, I would defer to sales on what we sell these for. Obviously there is a cost savings because we're reducing the number, but I can't divulge what our cost savings is or a price saving. It would come down to a price, and that would have to be a discussion with sales. Because cost is a proprietary, what it costs me to make something is different than what it costs the competitor. So there is a reduction. I'm not gonna lie, there is a motive for us to do this. Outside of, performance, and that's,
Well, I think the question is there a motive for me to do it? Because if I'm paying the same price, why am I doing it? Right? I understood all of the things you said about greenhouse emissions and stuff like that, but
so
let's face it, when we're city budgets, price is a factor.
it is, one of the things, we've looked at is, because of how much more it costs us to make those is actually just to keep the price where it is on the current ones. And you end up paying more for the heavy ones because it is much more labor intensive and costs us a lot more money. So, not saying we could look at cost and price. And like I said, cost and price to us are two different things. For price is your cost. But that's where I would defer to sales and to see what we'd be able to do there. But I'm not in the pricing realm of things, I guess. So,
Okay, my next comment / question is, under the current performance measuring in MAG, someone noted that it's possible fairly easily for a city to just weigh the product and determine if it's within specification or not. If we went to performance-based specification, how would a city verify that the product that is being provided meets the specification?
sure.
Even under the current scenario, what I've heard is we've had to reject products. So we can't rely on quality control from the manufacturer. That's clear because we've had to reject products over and over and over again
Due to
for being out of spec.
on our specific product, like weight or
I'm not
for
talking about
what?
your specific product. I'm talking
I
about,
can attest to that, yeah.
Yeah.
We've rejected, City of Glendale has rejected, which I talked to Adrian about that,
I'm familiar with
product based on weight because they did not meet the MAG specification on weight.
so if we went to a strictly performance-based specification, what would a city do to validate that the product was within specification?
So within AASHTO provides standards for testing of the materials. And it has several different ways you can test materials. You can test by test bar, which we pour test bars to test our product or our iron on a daily basis every 4 hours, or lot change of the iron. So we're always checking tensile strength of our materials. The other test is the load test. So typically what we do is we'll do a load test on the first design and show that, hey, what we're designing is going to work. It can even be randomly selected product. We don't care. And then everything else goes off of the test bar. What I will say about weight is, like I said early in my presentation, is weight does not equal performance. And where I'll go with this is if you buy a foreign casting, an Indian made casting, just because that casting is heavy, the quality of their material is not the same quality as mine. So it comes down to what is their quality control plan? Because we've had castings that were import castings that have failed miserably and weighed the same as ours. So it's because the quality of their material is less. So what we use is we use test bars that are pulled on a daily basis, and we can provide all the test reports. We've done this for some states require us to actually physically send test bars to the municipality that the municipality or the state then farms out to an outside lab to check the material. And those are cast at the same time that we cast the product. So there are methods for quality control that we can employ.
To piggyback on what Ryan had mentioned, because I had the same concerns when you mentioned that you would like to adopt a performance base. I would hate to have every agency have to review a design for a particular manufacturer manhole cover and have to have a record. Right now, everybody's casting to the same dimension. So ideally, I'm not
No, I understand.
agreeing with the proposal. I just, if we're gonna update it, I think we need to stick to that same concept of the detail outlines the dimensions and the weights of that casting so that every manufacturer is manufacturing the same one.
Okay, that's
Um,
fair.
Yeah, because otherwise, we're all gonna be reviewing designs for a frame and cover, and again, you can still have dimensional and weight requirements in the detail as well as quality control checks requirements and certification requirements.
Well, and the certification, is that a proficiency type sample that goes out to a third party laboratory for testing? Because
We can do it either way. We do certifications in-house on a daily basis to check our materials. So every 10 minutes, we check chemistry of our iron, and then every 4 hours, we're pulling actual test bars. We can send those to a lab of your choosing. We don't care. We do that with some of our customers now. We can send it directly to you, and some states actually have their own lab where they break stuff. So we've done it in multiple ways, and we're not opposed to that. If you want a third party check, we're more than welcome to do that.
well, as you can see, there's concerns in
Yep, no, I
just this
understand.
room, and we haven't even got to our online
Yep.
participants.
Understood.
And I guess, do you have anything else, Ryan?
I did.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Ryan. Keep going.
Keep going.
Aside from traffic dislodging lids, one of the things that I've seen multiple times myself is storm drain lids that get dislodged from pressure. And so it doesn't take much pressure to float a lid, even as heavy as it is. And I think we'd find increased frequencies of that by reducing the weight. And again, for all the reasons previously mentioned, going to watertight lids seems like a great idea, but it causes as many problems as it solves.
We have a few different products that we offer currently where we can vent some of that pressure. So we do have a product called HydroVent that does allow the lid to lift up, reduce the pressure, and then come back down. We've also put vents into lids that come up during a surge event, release the pressure so it doesn't push the cover up and then go back down. So there are different options. The challenge becomes, do you change your whole system? Are you having problems with only certain parts of your system? And I don't know that. You would know that better than I.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that changes where we have problems changes over time because it's a really tough system to
So-
manage.
Understood.
So I think, we're not really here to get all the answers, but we
Right.
definitely need to bring up the questions, and I appreciate, Ryan, I keep,
Well,
if you got
last-
more questions,
well,
keep going.
Last one. I guess more of a comment than a question on this is I've heard that, obviously, I don't think anyone disagrees with the technical analysis that can be done today to improve a product. And I think you'd probably find support of that. And if there's improvements to the design of the lid or the frame itself that can be validated through structural analysis, finite elements analysis, and other methods, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. It seems like you could do that on the same dimensional, nominal dimensional type of frame or cover or whatever it is, and maintain. The biggest concern you're hearing most people talk about is weight. And it seems like we could make, most of the improvements that have been discussed and increase the strength and manufacturing process, making that simpler and do all those things without necessarily modifying the things that people are most concerned with. So I guess that's a comment more than a question.
Thank you, Ryan. I hope, what my goal here is for everybody. I see, Adrian is back there taking notes, and that's really the goal. Like I said, we're not here to solve all the,
No.
To answer all the questions.
Yep.
But we're going to provide, as committee members, we'll provide the comments, and you guys please gather them up, take notes. Do we have any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Gene, I got a
I
quick
have-
one. Oh, go ahead. You were.
Just real quick, it's along the same lines as the weight, but one of the things that worry me when you mentioned the lighter cover is the potential for more vibration and noise, because we get a lot of complaints. That's, you get sediment in between the frame and the cover, and those things rattle. That's
So-
what the most concerning part would be as well.
Okay. We
I know
should,
initially with it being two machine surfaces. there
it should be
be
with two machine surfaces, it's fine. But I do know what happens over time with any manhole It gets its own wear patterns. You got crap put in there because the guy dragged it back in. No, I understand that. So that's a valid point. One way we've dealt with that a little bit, in some areas is people have required gasketing. So the gasket a lot of times can dampen that and reduce that if that is a concern. It's a relatively low cost adder to a product, buck a foot or something, and you're in business.
Okay, thank you, Jose. Craig?
Yeah, so my question is basically on the same lines that Jim kind of touched on, Ryan expanded on, and we're all kind of touching on this, the weight and the requirement of the specification. If we are using a finite, let me look at my notes, element analysis, sounds like we're getting very detailed on the iron itself. We should have a pretty solid understanding or an idea of what the weight's going to be.
So yeah, you're correct.
So-
If we do the FEA and we do a design, where we got to these weights was an iterative process of playing with the FEA and figuring out, okay, this is where we can be and still be safe and still provide a decent product. So you could, in theory, you could say, okay, that's where we want to be, whatever the weight is, and say, based on that, that's the minimum wall thicknesses, that's the minimum weight based on that design. You could definitely do that.
Okay. So here's kind of a sideways question you may not know the answer to, but I've been doing this a long time. Most manufacturers know their competitors' weights. If you're saying that some of the overseas lids are the same weight, but they're just not as strong. Trying to be real nice how I can say this. How can a municipality tell the difference between a 288-pound lid and a 288-pound lid? One from overseas and one not. Obviously, one's got a story on this too, but I won't go there. One that's got its own name, from India, and one that doesn't. The weights are still the same. Our inspectors don't go around with microscopes trying to make sure the steel's good. So.
Outside of the marking on the casting, one way to tell an import, most imports come coated. So at least in my experience, I don't know if that's here in Arizona and California, I know that's the case. They come with a coating on, and the reason they coat them is to hide defects. So they'll get porosity and stuff in the surface of the iron, so they'll coat them with an asphaltic because it fills all that in. If you took two next to each other and they look the same and they weighed the same, and I didn't put any markings on, odds are you're not going to be able to tell the difference between the two. Then it comes down to, as a municipality or an agency, what you require for testing requirements, or do you go as far as what some areas have done and go to a Buy America clause, where you can't sell an import into a market. On a federal level, if there's federal dollars attached, obviously it's a Buy America clause. And a lot of states have done that as well, just because so much of their funds, or a portion of their funds, come from the federal. On the municipal level, we've seen varying degrees of that. It depends on what people's tolerances are for that and what they want to do.
So then how would a municipality be able to tell the difference? And maybe we wouldn't right now. My question's kind of 5 years down the road.
So
what can we do on our standards to be able to make it clear to our inspection team that, hey, this is an import, this is not, or this is the correct steel?
We do everything. The foundry mark is the way to do it. We have it made in USA on all of our stuff. That doesn't mean that somebody couldn't cheat that. Who you purchase it from can make a difference as well. So certain companies sell imports, certain companies don't sell imports. Neenah doesn't sell any imports. And then they're required to say country of origin. So that's a requirement. Whether they comply with the requirement is a whole different question.
And it's not that it can't be ground off either.
No, absolutely.
No,
Absolutely.
we've seen that happen.
Absolutely. I've seen that happen more than you know.
The biggest thing would be that seeing it in the field, you'd have to get it pre-approved and get it. So this is the brand of the casting, and here's my test data to go with it. That's the easiest way to make sure that you're getting the right thing. Some states go so far as to pre-certify heat dates on castings. So in the state of Massachusetts, we submit test bars, and they produce a list on their website, and it said, okay, Neenah and East Jordan, which would be the two main domestic foundries in Massachusetts that could serve that area. You're approved on these dates. And so the inspector knows that if I see a Neenah casting and it has this date on the bottom of the casting, that's approved. That's how Massachusetts does it. So there's varying ways that way. You have to kind of do it through a combination of the test data and what's written on the casting.
And that's one thing our mag detail has is the heat casting.
Yep,
or
and
the
we
heat
put
date.
that on all of our castings. We get a heat date and we'll have the foundry mark Maine USA.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's one of the things, or a few of the things I'd like to see is I do want to stick with the weights just because, like I said, maybe it's just something that's comforting right now. We've been doing this for 100 years and this is what's just comfortable.
Understood.
But I'd also want to make sure that the markings and the insignia that are on there, we can clearly put that in the standard, just so, again, when our inspectors are out in there in the field, Paul, you know very well, you're going to look at a manhole lid. You're not going to see a certification. You're not going to see a sheet. You're going to see a round steel piece of metal. You know.
Doesn't Astro 306 have some verbiage about import casting?
It does. Astro M306 for import castings, one of the things you can't require is cast on test bars. So it's written into the standard, and that was by design in the Astro standard. A cast on test bar is a casting that comes with the test bar attached to the casting. So you get your finished manhole lid or frame or whatever, and on there is 2 test bars attached to it. And that's something you can require of an import without, so it's in a sense creating a Buy America preference without stating it. Well, you're an import casting, you have to have the cast on test bars. It's written into the Astro standard as an option. Good, thanks, Jeff.
So regardless, the import's going to cost more because now there's more testing.
Potentially.
Potentially, thank
Yeah,
you.
potentially.
Potentially.
It represents the casting that it's attached to,
Right.
because they poured it with that casting.
But the bar's kind of worthless unless you test it.
Correct. Who's gonna test it?
Right.
Correct.
Anyways, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Do we have any more questions on the presentation that was given by Neenah?
Hi, this is Warren. Kind of related to all that. Thank you for the presentation. Is I guess longevity. I know with the lighter weight, and I was just curious if you, based on these new performance standards, have you looked at longevity in terms of right now, as you know, in local streets, not so much of a problem. Arterial streets, the recessing of those lids over time becomes a problem. And have you, with the lighter weight, is that going to be more of a problem over time?
That's
Just curious on that.
Sure. So that's one area that we don't change the dimension on so that you can actually match your existing frame. So what you do over time, I know what you're talking about, where the cover now all of a sudden is sitting 1/4 inch lower than the top of the frame. And that's just caused by traffic going over and over time. We don't change that dimension, and we are typically keeping the center dimension fairly similar. Where we're getting the most of our weight reduction on the lids is taking those ribs off. If you look at the center dimension, we're staying within probably 1/8 of an inch of that lid thickness. So we're getting it, where we're getting it is we're taking the ribs, that's where we're reducing our weight. So I haven't personally seen anything where that's been an issue. So I can't.
It's kind of related to what Jose was saying in terms of the debris that gets underneath over time. It's like sandpaper, it wears it down. And that recess occurs, right?
Yeah, and the seated area of the casting where that would occur, that dimension does not change. So if you're 1.5 inches now, we wouldn't want to change that because you'd still want to be interchangeable with your existing frames. I'm not going to make something that's now 1 inch thick at the edge.
Thank you, Warren. We have any other questions on the presentation? Excuse me.
So I'm on in place of Joe Malone. So as a contractor for 30 years and a guy who's almost 50 years old and lifted many manhole lids off by myself, I can appreciate reducing the weight of the lid. I think your PowerPoint covered a lot of the concerns we have with dislodging and such. What about noise complaints? You know, if a 280-pound lid rattles quite a bit, what's a 210-pound lid going to do, or whatever the numbers were? Are there going to be more noise complaints, especially in residential areas?
I don't know the answer to that. We haven't received in Chicago would be our biggest market that we did this in Illinois, and in Wisconsin, we did it a lot. I haven't received more noise complaints. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with the fact that we are providing machine bearing surfaces, at least, initially. And a lot of areas have gone to gasketing in general. That's a lighter cover, you're not wrong, is going to rattle more if there is a way for it to rattle. Not going to lie, it is the case.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that would just be my main concern. I mean, a lot of the projects we do are alternative delivery, and we do get a lot of complaints from residents, stakeholders and such. And if all of a sudden new manholes make more noise than the old manholes, those are going to be more complaints that individual municipalities have to deal with. So I don't know if throughout your load testing and different tests you've performed, if you've noticed more noise coming from these at a higher significant level, decibel level, or if they're just minimally increased.
Yeah, we haven't done any specific testing as far as noise. It's mainly anecdotal and what we've heard from the field. So I've not done noise testing specifically on a cover.
No, thank you. Is this question coming from the AGC representative? You're covering for Joe Malone, you said?
Yeah, this is Mike Jones Jr. with Hayden.
Mike, how are you?
Good, buddy.
Thank you for the questions, Mike. Appreciate it. These are
One more
go ahead, Craig.
just came up. So we talked a lot about Wisconsin, Illinois, and Missouri. Those are the three states you're kind of pushing on, and sounds like Arizona. Have you have other covers in other states, and are they using the thicker design, the thinner design?
Nebraska's using thinner designs, Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Oregon, not Maryland. Where's that? Idaho. So I would say most of the states that we're doing business in, we have some level of this.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna have to get moving if we want to get out of here at a decent time. But if anybody else has any brief questions, now's the time to bring it up. All right, none being heard. We're gonna move to agenda item number 5. This is cases carried forward from 2023. Case 23-09 is proposed new section for 632 water and sanitary sewer tracer wire installation and related details. This one in particular, I can appreciate. This is something that I struggled with 2 decades of inspection out in the field. This question always came up. What do we do with the tracer wire when we get to the manhole? What do we do with the tracer wire when we get to the water valve? But I'll go ahead and open this up. Gordon, we should probably get an update on this case, correct?
Yes, Warren provided an update in the pack, and I believe he's online.
Yeah, Warren, if you could please give us an update, it would be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there is an update in this packet, and on page 3, I've summarized the updates. Most of the updates are based on Craig Sharp from Buckeye provided some good markups, and we looked through a few, and I think there's still a few that we may need to discuss further, either in this meeting or in the water and sewer. But some of them stem around the updates I did were related to the installation, the wire installation itself. The spec at the time is written as HDPE as the only insulation allowed. And I have revised it to make it more general at this point. I did note there the changes of the pipe, the insulation materials. However, talking with the industry, I think there is some concern about moving away from that HDPE. There are other insulation types out there, but there's concern that if we remove that, the contractors may end up using the THWN insulation, which is not direct bury optional. The XLPE PVC may be used by certain industries, but I feel like that we still need to talk about that a little more. But we may revert back to HDPE, but we need to talk more. And Craig, I think you may have had some discussions with Troy about that as well, but felt like we need to talk about that. If we do, it's an easy fix in the spec at this point. I can show you that. But beyond that, just made some general fixes that we talked about in the last meeting and a little bit in the working group, and then just removed some redundancies. So you want to go ahead and page down. You can look at those real quick, Gordon. So a lot of the information is covered in general. So it's with this spec written this way. So it makes it easy to kind of capture those things. So we don't have to put the insulation is already there in that third paragraph. So the reason you have the insulation itself obviously is resistant to moisture, abrasion, and temperature changes. Some of those wire covers insulation they're not of those caliber. They cannot withstand abrasion or temperature changes and moisture in particular. So that's pretty simple, just those changes there.
Well,
What about corrosion?
thank you for the update, Warren. I appreciate it. I haven't heard any opposition to the direction that this is going. I think it's going in, personally, I believe it's going in the right direction. If I'm going to open this up for basically discussion and comments, if there is any opposition from any of the other municipalities or even industry, I'd appreciate them speaking up now before we get too far into this. So with that, I'll go ahead and open this up to discussion. It was brought to my attention there might be a question online regarding corrosion.
Yeah, I asked about corrosion because I know a lot of different municipalities have different soil types.
And yeah, that is one of the aspects of the direct bury HDPE. It would withstand any type of soil conditions.
So one thing, Mike, to mention, Mike Jones, there's for the connection points, I don't know if you've gone through the actual proposed new section, but there are watertight or corrosion proof connections that take place that have a grease or other applications to kind of protect that steel clad or that copper clad wire from corroding. So if you get an opportunity,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, before Gordon moves on, just want to interject something there, but let me know when you're ready.
Go ahead, Warren.
Okay, on this particular detail here, I changed the graphics there on the direct bury wire nut. Beforehand, it was more of a twist-on looking nut, so I made it look more like the more robust one that has the filament, the Vaseline or whatever that is in there. So, and what I'm envisioning also to probably add here, along with figure 1, is we touched on it in the last meeting. It's in the vendor provided a sample of that snake bite option, which is a more locking connector. And we kind of debated in there whether we wanted to allow or to require the locking versus the direct bury. I feel like we want to allow both, but I'm thinking of adding another graphic beside that with that snake bite option for agencies to choose.
I would agree with that, Warren.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think having that option in there, I'm getting a lot of nods here. That's what's nice about having in person. You get to see the expressions on people's faces. And I'm getting a lot of nods that, yeah, we should probably include that.
Okay, good.
Not necessarily manufacturer specific, but
right.
just the type of apparatus to be used.
And along with that, I have asked for, and I do plan to send this out to another vendor for their input. I'm waiting on some recommendations right now on that.
So Warren, besides support that you've been receiving, have you got any negative feedback as far as opposition to adding this type of, these connections and adding and changing and revising this section of MAG 632?
No, I have not received any negative feedback.
Good.
All positive feedback.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
I would just say that I know on the contracting side, we want a spec like this. We've been craving something like this because everywhere you go, it's some other different kind of mishmash stuff that doesn't seem very consistent. We're looking forward to this.
I can respect that, Paul. I appreciate it.
Add to that, we're actually talking about taking our Toll Tracer wire spec out of ours and just going to what Mag's got in this. So yeah, you come to Buckeye, you go to Glendale, whatever, contractor's gonna do the same thing everywhere he goes.
Well, and the Maricopa Association of Governments is just that, right? Uniformity.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Warren, is there any language in there, in this revision that would allow the use of either or with marker balls versus tracer wire? What do you recall that looking like? Because, we don't want to necessarily require both, but is there an option?
Well, this one here is written specifically for tracer wire. I think we'd have to go to the waterline installation spec itself and then maybe put something into that would allow for an agency to choose their option to meet the ARS, I guess, so to speak.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm happy to, we can look at that too and see if that's something we want to throw in here.
Well,
That
I
might
think,
snowball it a little bit because that'll take us into the sewer installation spec and the water and reclaimed, but that's okay.
This, Craig, I would suggest at this point, just trying to get the tracer wire through because this is already a carryover case. We want to make sure we get this done this year.
Good point. We can always tackle those at another time.
Yes,
Yeah, I
yes,
can
my
agree
point
with that.
exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. I could agree with that. We have any other questions or comments on the tracer wire?
yeah, Warren, I had a question, Mr. Chairman, too. So, I know like an Avondale spec, we have tracer wire that comes up into the valve box and, we have had challenges with that. And I don't know if we're gonna have that on here. My only thing is, there might be a need to come up in the valve box. And if so, should we at least include it as an option? Or I just see what the group thinks about, or should we just not even consider it? Because if you use a Type C valve boxes, it's a real challenge because the wires get caught up in the valve keys. So,
Jim, I can appreciate that comment. I've had firsthand knowledge with that. And what I've had them do in the past is have them come up outside of the valve can, the riser, and then poke it in through the annular space between the frame and cover and the valve can itself, kind of in that AB area, that ABC area. That way it's not gonna get wrapped up, but now you only have a 2-inch stub piece that you're tying onto. You can't have, you're not gonna have 3 feet of wire wound up and shoved in there. But Warren, if we do get in a situation, we may need to have something addressing if it comes up in a valve box, what it looks like, what that detail looks like. Have you guys talked about that at the working group?
A little bit in this past year, and this layout as it is, it comes out in different places, not in the valves themselves. Because yes, valves are often in the roadway, but sometimes they are outside the road. But these would be in a typical location, would be in an access box or these meter locations. So that would be available for locators to get to without having to get into a valve box. If we feel like we want to have another one for that scenario, we can. And I did modify this time around, so would allow agencies to use a valve box for an access port and not just the ones that we saw in the demonstration.
Yeah, and maybe to Jim's point, there's a note on, maybe we create a note. Doesn't necessarily have to be, maybe it is, maybe it looks like another detail, but it doesn't necessarily have to be another detail. Just indicating, you know, if in the event the tracer wire needs to come up in the valve box, it stays out of the can itself and rather comes up in that annular space. Or if, I don't even know if other people agree with that, but I'm just spitballing ideas here.
And maybe if you page up, Gordon, maybe we can put it into the spec and add that a note on the water spec portion all the way up into the section. Keep going up all the way up to the.
And type C valves and regular valve boxes, type A valve boxes are quite different too. You know?
Well, it's easier to do in a type A, you know, but the problem is a type C, which we use is a problem. So, I mean, granted, it is, you know, nice not to have to get out in the traffic if you have to get it, but there might be an occasion where you know, you might need to put it in a valve box. Because there are runs we don't have like hydrants, you know, like a well line, a feed line. You know, there's no hydrants off of that line. It's just a line with valves. So
that's
you know,
true.
you'd have to put alternate, you know, locations, test points, if you want to call it.
And that's the way it's written currently, is like those long transmission mains where you may have just a valve every mile per se. You would have a point where it would come out into one of those access boxes. But you know, definitely we have room to add a clause in here, and maybe even on the graphic down below, Gordon, if you page down, maybe we can add something as a, see right here on yeah, for example, we could add a valve on this one and add a note, say C section, or for cases where you may need to have access as a valve.
Well, I would just say simple note like this, Warren, where you just, you know, if agency requires, you know, testing wires or tracer wire into valve box, here, use this detail. So I don't want it to incur that you have to do it as a normal procedure, you know, on all, but just kind of as an alternate or an additional option. Let's call it an additional option if required by the agency. You know, that way, if the agency says, no, I want them in the valve box, then you've got a detail for it in MAG. So,
or Jim, when not feasible, you know, it can come up in a valve box when it's not feasible to bring it like on a transmission line where you only have maybe a couple of hydrants so far apart, or valves so far apart, maybe one hydrant as a blow off, but maybe when not feasible and a valve can is used, something like that. Maybe, Warren, if you could take that back to the committee or the working group and see if you guys come up with something on that. I think it would be valuable.
Sure, definitely.
you know, just as an additional alternate or something if required, because you know we've got some lines with cathodic protection, and with all the development going on, these things get destroyed, and so we're scrambling trying to locate these water lines, and you know, you're just going off of the valves because all these test ports for the cathodic have been destroyed, and it's just, you know, it's just another way to be able to find this stuff underground. So,
well, and Jim, you mentioned destroyed. That kind of refreshes my memory. The only real feedback that I've got from my water distribution group was their concern when the wire gets damaged, you know, how that replacement or how that repair takes place, and does that repair happen? Obviously, if nobody saw it, nobody saw the damage, probably won't see the repair, but that was one of the concerns, one of the little bit of the feedback I got from my group.
Just a comment, that's why we don't want to spread this tracer wire all over the place like they're trying to do this cable TV crap. They're zipping in under the asphalt everywhere. Because then, especially in a new subdivision, I could see tracer wire and everything. The paving contractor comes in and just totals your system and then tells you to go raise it.
Well,
it's an issue.
The detail on this one, correct me if I'm wrong, Warren, but the detail on this one, isn't it in the maybe 4 o'clock or 7 o'clock position, the tracer wire, not necessarily on top of the pipe.
The way we modified this spec based on the Minnesota rural water original is I changed it to be on top of the pipe, so it was more visible.
Okay.
Their location was, like you said, at a, I forget if it was on the clock position on the right side. I can't remember, but I changed it to be on top of the pipe.
I thought there was I recall during the presentation that we had that there was, I guess, some pushback on having it on top of the pipe due to damage when loading with ABC, that it was suggested, maybe I heard that wrong, that it was suggested to be more in the, I guess it would be 5 o'clock position or 4 o'clock position.
There was that discussion, but at this point, it's based on visibility and I guess based on Chandler's installation has been on top of the pipe. I think other areas, other
I can
agencies.
tell you from we're inspecting the stuff in the field, it's a lot easier when it's on top of the pipe for inspecting it. I mean, obviously we do continuity tests, but it's, you know, visually it's for an inspector, it's easier when it's on top of the pipe.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we do get that continuity test.
True.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I think it does depend on whether you're doing a cathodically protected system or not, because if you are, I would assume the test wire would be run to the test station, which a lot of times those are actually out of the roadway. And if you're not, you would want to bring them up at valves, just so to help locators in locating the line if they're not looking at as-builts or record drawings. But the valves are also a good place to do your splices, because I'd rather have a splice at a valve to where if it fails, at least it's visible and can be fixed, versus in the middle of a run where it's got wire nuts on it.
Yeah, and that's going to be dependent on the length of your wire as well. I mean, it doesn't always fall right at the valve, right?
Yeah, I mean, we don't always get 5,000-foot rolls. Sometimes we get 1,000 or 500-foot rolls, but that's a matter, I think, of the contractor pre-planning and having good drawings and specs to know what is expected of them when they build the job.
That's a good point, Mike.
And the spec does speak to some of those links and where you need access and so on.
All right, we have anything else on this case?
Just one last thing. I know earlier you guys talked about marker ball option. I would like to keep that option, you know, open and maybe just separate spec. I mean, there are instances where you might need to use marker balls, you know, like for vertical realignments or something. So, you know, it's just something where I don't want, you know, the spec written where if you're going to use tracer wire, then we automatically don't have to use the tracer or the marker balls. There are times we need the marker balls. So to me, it's up to the agency to kind of dictate which one they want to use, or both, or whatever. So
I would agree. This would be more tools in the toolbox, really. You would have two options. I would agree with that, Jim.
All right, thanks.
The marker balls definitely come in handy when a line changes from 12 foot right to 18 feet right, and finding exactly where that horizontal realignment is. Especially if the tracer wire isn't dead center of the pipe, where they can get a good tone and mark it out. If it's on the right edge of a 16-inch line, well, they could be a foot off.
Well, and Mike, I'm sure you can contest to the marker balls are handy when the directional boring operation on a 10-inch HDPE welded pipe is pulled through and the tracer wire breaks and there's no way to get the tracer wire back in. You pothole and you drop marker balls on that running line, right? Glendale,
Yeah.
150.
That's when you explain to people in that instance you want the tracer wire on the side, because when it's on the top and you're pulling it, it does tend to break the wire. And you pull it with two wires just in case one breaks. You've got a secondary wire.
Well, they also use a different thickness gauge wire when they're polling now. That's in the provisions also to have a different thickness for that actual pulling the pipe through during the directional bore.
Absolutely. That's why this mag's here, to make things better for us, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 6, which is going to be new cases for 2024, case 24-01 miscellaneous corrections. Right now, we just have the one on there for section 325.8 quality control, the second paragraph to remove the extra space in shall. Should I read?
It's up to you.
All right, we'll go ahead and move into case number 7. Or I'm sorry, agenda item number 7, case 24-02, the revisions to the section 711 paving asphalt. This is to basically change the language and remove the polyphosphoric acid and the REOB, the refined recycled engine oil bottoms as asphalt modifiers. I haven't had any opposition to this, and I would strongly encourage the entire committee to move forward with action on this today, unless there's any opposition. We can open it up for quick information and discussion. I'd like Greg possibly or whoever we have with the asphalt working group to just kind of briefly summarize why we're doing this, and then we can open it up to discussion and possible action.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Greg's not able to be on. This is Jeff Hearn. I don't believe we've received any questions, comments, concerns about this item. And if we remember from the last meeting, there are a few of the agencies who've already made this change. And our point here is to try to make this change in egg and not have it be something that would be, agency specific.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate you stepping in. So basically what you're saying is the other municipalities, for those that didn't follow along at the last one or wasn't at the last meeting, the other municipalities are falling in line with removing the PPA. They've already have that in their standards, including the EVAC. Is that correct, Ryan? I know I talked with my city engineer and my materials engineer, and both of them were in 100% support of removing it, just for the simple fact of the risk of receiving it when you don't want it or cross-contamination. This is something that's coming from industry, and I think we ought to look strongly at voting on this today. Does anybody have any questions or comments or discussion on this topic? Well, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Chair, I'll move to approve case 24-02, revisions to section 711 paving asphalt.
Thank you, Ryan. Do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Was that Dan?
Yes, it was.
Thank you, Dan. I think we can go ahead and start a roll call vote.
Okay. This time I'm going to start in the middle with Goodyear. Goodyear, are you present? How about Maricopa County?
Yes, we are in support.
Thank you. Mesa,
Yes.
Peoria,
Yes.
Phoenix,
Yes.
Scottsdale,
Yes.
Surprise. Don't think Surprise is present today. Tempe. Michelle, are you on? Youngtown's not present. Avondale.
Yes.
Buckeye,
Buckeyes, yes.
Chandler,
Yes.
El Mirage.
Yes.
Thank you. Gilbert,
Yes.
Glendale.
Glendale's yes.
Back to Goodyear. And Tempe, second chance. Okay, the motion passes.
Thank you, Gordon. It's great to hear that we got something early on. Got a revision in. I appreciate everybody's input on that. All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item number 8, which is potential cases for 2024. I know we talked about Brashear's not on with Tempe, but Brashear had a question regarding trench plates and slip resistant or skid resistant plates. I don't think he's not on to give any update on whether he's going to pursue that or not as a potential case. But I can tell you that I did reach out to Trench Shore Rentals, TSR, and I was able to find some skid resistant related. There you go. Some skid resistant related stuff. The top one is from TSR. The bottom one is from another outfit out of California. But I went ahead and shared that with Brashear and with the others that were interested, such as I think it was Arvid, and I know Jose Rodriguez had some questions on it. But any other discussion on this topic on potential cases for any other potential cases?
Yeah, Gene, I actually drove over one of these in Goodyear just week before last and thought about the same items that you're taking pictures of, Was there noise problems? Is there anything that, and I really didn't notice the plates. In fact, in this construction zone, I had plates with hard facing and plates without. And I really didn't notice much of a difference. I mean, I wasn't looking at a long area.
Yeah, maybe if it was a 1,500 feet of it, you might be able. Yeah,
I know, but since we started milling and stuff, are we seeing plates moving around that much?
I don't think it's the moving that is the concern. I think the concern is the tread.
It's the tread of the
vehicles. Yeah, and here's a perfect example. I've had 2 accidents in 2 weeks at a particular intersection near Westgate. We're doing a sewer line, no left turns, blah, blah, blah. Well, these people are still making left turns. You can't stop that. But where the issue lies is I now have a manhole that I have to plate up in this rain, and I have Supercross coming. And I don't want to have a hazard out there. Couldn't pave it in the rain. So I reached out to the contractor to see if we can find some kind of skid resistant. So it was a perfect timing for me that Brashear brought that up. It got me thinking. So
interesting.
All right. Thank you, Craig. Is there any other potential cases for 2024? If not, we'll go ahead and move on.
So are these for linear applications or perpendicular to center line?
That hasn't been discussed. It was more of a question. Is there anything out there that can help in these circumstances that, we could call out? So that was never, we never dove into it that far. It's not a case. It was just potential. Oh, well, we're, as far as how long how the distance, the lineal footage, you would be bound to mag on the trench opening, which is what, 15, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. It's around 1,500 feet, somewhere around there. Okay, about a half a mile.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be my concern is, I see gas installations and such across the valley and other utilities to where you've got plates in one wheel path and say the passenger side and the driver's side's on asphalt for 1,000 feet. So it probably does impact stopping compared to just crossing a perpendicular trench.
Yeah, and that was the concern at intersections mainly, where you have that shearing going on, that braking effect or acceleration.
So is that just a matter of the municipality, instead of, hey, we need to have this lane open by 3 p.m., that we make it a 24-hour lane closure?
Well, it never really got that far, Mike. It's more of just a potential case. It's not even a case yet. It's just something that may be coming up in the near future. So we really haven't unpacked that fully. We just had brief discussions on it.
Yeah,
and I-
the intent would be to replace, traffic control. Traffic control is a separate issue. This is just, adequately, if you have to put traffic on a lane and you can safely plate it, do you want a skid resistant plate? And, longitudinal runs and plates at intersections is where more of the concern is for braking and for, motorcycles, that type of thing when it gets wet. So it's just an option to make this plating when required safer. It's not it replaces or, mitigates any traffic control. That's, to me, are two different things. So.
And Jim, to that point, when I approached my contractor and asked him specifically for pricing as well, compared to a standard trench plate to see if there was going to be a pricing difference. And, when it comes to safety like that in an intersection with maybe 4 plates, pricing wasn't really too much of a concern for me on this particular project, but we also had the margin in it to allow out a contingency. So anyway, is any other potential cases for 2024? If not, I'm going to move on to the next action.
This is David Fritz from McDonald.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if this is the right spot for it, but I know we talked about this beginning of last year. We talked about micro trenching, and I don't know, just for discussion, is there any interest in MAG developing a micro trenching specification in detail this year? I know Mesa's been doing it, and McDonald has been approached by it, and we just wonder if there's any interest this year in looking at developing a MAG spec.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a hot topic, especially in this day and age of information. Everybody wants to get their stuff in the ground, right? We had a pilot program as well in Glendale in a residential area and on Quick Connect. So I'm pretty familiar with it. I haven't heard anything about potential cases for that, but there is definitely a lot of discussion. Ryan, do you guys in Mesa have anything?
We have our details and specifications we created, and we've had some challenges and have refined those a couple times already and continue to test it. We've got a lot of it going on. Mesa at this point is not ready to propose a case for MAG, so that's not something that I'd be bringing this year.
You're still a test subject. So Mesa's still the test subject. David, to answer your question.
That's fine. I know Maricopa County is going to be looking at developing a spec as well. We're not going to be doing anything that's probably any different from anybody else, but we've been approached and we need to have something probably in place. So when we have to do it, that we have something ready.
Well, based on that comment, I would encourage you to look at Mesa's details or work with Ryan possibly on getting those details and so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can learn from mistakes.
Yeah, we do have their information. I've actually been out on the site to see it being installed. So yeah, we're familiar with theirs, and we're like I said, we're definitely not going to go our own way. We don't want to reinvent what's being done and what's working right now.
Fair enough.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, David. All right, we're going to move on to agenda item number 9, which is outside of right-of-way. These are cases carried forward from 2023. This is 23-06, the new vegetated or rock bioswales. This is something that I shared with my environmental group. They're going through it now. At one point, we did have a member sitting on the working group for the LID stuff, but why don't we go ahead and get an update on this? I don't know who we have. Peter?
Yes, I don't see Bashir on, but there's been no changes. We've had no input yet on it since the last time we've talked about it. So what you see here is the last version that was provided to the committee.
This is from January, the same version?
Yes. Yeah. The changes last time were simply just putting the numbering on it. That's all it's gone. There's no quantitative change in this.
Well, Peter, I can assure you that I will get you something, some kind of comments, whether it's a pat on the back, good job, or something in the next meeting or second meeting as my environmental group's looking at it pretty closely.
Very good, thank you. And we've got the sections and the details. That'd be great to get some feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd encourage others to take this back to their groups also as well, and provide Peter with some feedback so we can keep it moving. Because if nobody says anything or makes any comments, then we assume everything's all good, right?
Yeah, last year we did go through one round of changes, so it's not like we've got no comments at all on it. We did do some changes, like the notification. What does that mean? Water surface elevation, the travel lane information. So those were modified prior. So yeah, any additional comments would be great. We'd love to get this one being the first one in the standard book.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. I'm going to open this up for discussion. If anybody has any questions, comments, or anything on the outside of right away case 23-06. All right, hearing none, we're going to move to item number 10, which is also outside of the right of way, 23-10. This is the thermoplastic bodied PVC drain basins. I had mentioned before we'd used this application on some police expansion projects that we had done for their parking lots. Worked great. Kept the cost down for the project. Facilities was quite happy that we were able to keep costs down. It was a great application or that was a perfect application for this type of product. Who do we have that's going to give an update on this item?
Warren, I wasn't sure if
Yeah.
you had any background on it, on the changes or not. I've got a little list.
I do have a little, and I know Noah's here as well for any questions. Nick was good to share an update to Gordon and I where he was with this. As you can see, the title is now changed, thermoformed PVC drain basins. I guess that was discussed in the last working group, Peter, and everyone agreed that was a little redundant with the previous title, correct?
Yeah, I noticed that. So maybe Gordon, on the agenda, we can reflect that thermoformed from thermoplastic bodied PVC drain basins to thermoformed.
Yes,
PVC
I'll
drain
make that
basins.
change for the next meeting.
Thank you, Gordon. All right, sorry about that, Warren.
No, that I'm glad you noted that, Mr. Chair. I was going to say that too on the title of the case. And then beyond that, looks like they made some additional changes to the section or the outside right away, section 650, based on some suggestion from Peter, and then just some cleanup to make it more mag friendly language. They did some updates to the details. Let's see, updating some notes, removed all references to proprietary information specific to one company. That's good. So that kind of captures in a quick update of what changes have been done.
Some other highlights that I wanted to reference is that the notes, the prior version, you saw a lot of notes on the details that were related to the materials or installation. Those have been moved, and the specification sections have been beefed up significantly. So we don't have a lot of repetition. So you don't see the same thing over and over again. Now we've got them in one place on the section itself, on the sections themselves. So you'll see those beefed up quite a bit. The details are skinnied up compared to what I think you've seen on the last ones. The sections themselves, I think what we really do want to, or the details themselves are what we really want to get some comments, things to focus on as you're doing the reviews of this. It's the first detail. I think we've got it as 560-1. There's a note on there on traffic loads referencing the slab. That's the upper right corner. Please review that note. It says traffic loads. It's talking about there is kind of a reference toward design. And we need to see how we can balance, since this is not the same as the prior ones where we had prohibition on design. Here we are incorporating some, see if that language is acceptable. Should we be modifying it? Again, this is kind of a trial one on how do we tell somebody you have to look at site-specific conditions to design something that's unique to that location without having a standard that says you design it, you build it this way every time. So that's one there that's kind of a one to stand out on. I think I did catch a couple places where there's still reference to a single vendor, and I'll get that changed in the notes. And then references to design requirements, the types of loading. Do we want to focus that in the details, or do we want to put it in the standards themselves, the written text component of that, where we've got the rating information? And again, my goal is, my thinking is, we want to standardize where stuff's at. What does it do on a detail? Does it help to have it on a detail? Should it be a requirement that's in a standard section that would be going to a manufacturer? Similarly, the details for the grates themselves, are they detailed enough? And that's one thing I'd like the committee to look at as you're doing your reviews. Do we need more detailing on those? Do we think it's sufficient, again, for the purpose that we're talking about here? So those are kind of the highlights that I wanted to bring up as you do your reviews. Things I've noticed, I did some side-by-side comparisons of the existing grate details, and are we going far enough is really the question on those. I think that's all I found is going through it, and I want to just kind of bring out as a highlight. I don't think we're quite ready for a vote because we really do need this feedback now.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I can appreciate that. Thank you, Warren, for also putting in there. Now, mentioning the concrete slab dimensions and whatnot, and being, site specific and local soil conditions, would it be appropriate to maybe add something, refer to the geotechnical report or geotech report?
Or this would be a good way, refer to the construction plans, or refer to the project plans for site.
Put it on the record to address then.
Yeah. So again, this is kind of our first one where we're diving into something that has some design elements, and how do we want to address that, or do we want to address it? How can we accomplish what we need to out of it but make sure it gets taken care of? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I don't have any immediate concerns with 8-inch thick.
I don't either. Yeah, I mean, I kind of have the same thought that if it's 8-inch thick, it's probably going to be okay.
We use that out on arterial for some applications, depending on the strength of the concrete.
Yeah, that's been the one unique thing. We did go through a lot of MAG standards or MAG details. There's not a lot of aprons around grates used. And so, or anything similar to that, usually either in gutter lines, there are places where there's already concrete that's incorporating it. So it was a bit of a unique one. I did some looking at some airport standards that had a similar one, and felt that the 8-inch was going to be sufficient. I'll leave it at that. But again, as you all take looks at it, think about it and see, do we need more or less? I like the 18-inch. I think 18-inch by 8 is going to be just fine. For having it in the parking lot there. And I know that when ADS looked at this originally, they showed us a lot of photographs of these put in and different ages, and we didn't really see any cracking on them.
Yeah, I think you mitigate a lot of the concerns with that thickness. And depending on what's the strength of concrete called out there? Is it just a MAG B, or what are we calling out?
I have to go back in the spec and look. I can't remember. In the material section, we've got that.
So that's something we'd have to look at.
Yeah, we're gonna have to look at that. Again, those are wonderful comments to have, and I'm looking through it now, and I don't actually see the concrete.
I can chime in on that. So the 8-inch thick by 18-inch wide is based off of testing that we did at Utah State. And the compressive strength that we used, I believe, was 3,500. But we do have an LRFD that supports those dimensions, and they call out for 4,000.
Wow. So you got MAG A and MAG AA. Okay.
AA, yeah. So that's probably something we need to consider adding to this in the, either in the section or on the drawing. Probably the drawing would be a good place to identify the concrete type.
Yeah, and
with
8
this
inches,
reference mag.
at 8 inches thick in a parking lot, I don't see why it couldn't be the same as say a valley gutter or an apron.
Agreed. I don't know if we really even need the note that it should be specifically designed for the soils. I mean, we could put something in the standard itself under the in the design component of there, identifying that if there's something unusual, consider that. But that's a construction standard. It's not a design standard.
Gotcha. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Any other questions on this item? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 11, the other working group reports. We have the water sewer working group. Jim, do you have an update you want to give, or?
Yeah, I'll keep it really short and for sake of time here. So
You.
we met on January 23rd. Had a pretty good turnout. It was all our meetings are all virtual on the Zoom platform with the help of Gordon. So we basically talked about Warren's case, the locator wire. So I'm not going to cover any of those details. A short discussion, really just, anticipation for the discussion from Nina's presentation, which we had earlier. And then we had some discussion, on new casing materials, and this is for large, diameter borings. Or we had a representative from Hobos, so that the fiberglass reinforced pipe is becoming very popular as an alternate to steel casing for boring large diameter bores, like under railways and other infrastructure like that. So that's going to be a potential case probably this year coming up. The other one we talked about, we're working on another case this year. Hopefully will be a standardization of sewer testing, more of a depth gauge for videos. And then we might come up with some minimum standards of manufacturing for mandrels, like size and how they're constructed, basically just dimensions, that type of thing. So we have more of a standard for mandrels, which are used to test deflection in pipes.
Is that something you're currently working on or actively working on, Jim?
Yeah, we're actively working on that. We've got a couple good representatives. A gentleman by the name of Kent Carlson. He's on the ASTM spec standards as well, and so we're got a direct feed from him with that. So ASTM is designing or coming up with a spec for mandrels, and so we're going to basically kind of copy that. So that's maybe this year we'll be able to do that. We're hoping. You might see another case for a standard precast reinforced concrete box culvert, similar to what ADOT has. We might do a modification to the polymer concrete manhole bases. We had Dan Brosh from Amarok was there. Just kind of cleaning up the current spec we have. It's kind of trial and error out there. The agencies that are using them, and so there's some things that we could modify to make them a little bit better. Then we're also talking about the PEX A for water services in the right of way. So we've got Jeremy Brown is from the manufacturer, is working with hopefully a couple cities, maybe from the east side. I think Gilbert's using them now, experimenting with it. So we might have a case on that coming forth. Again, this would be an alternate to copper. And that was about it.
You guys have a lot.
These are all potential cases, so we hopefully might see something.
I see the PVC C909 in there. Is that 909 water pipe?
Yeah, that's something that I kind of brought this up. I need to work with some industry people on that to see if we want that as an alternate pipe, so.
Well, I can tell you right now, I had a manufacturer come to Glendale and give a presentation on 909 because it's a superior product from what they've described, but I wouldn't be surprised if industry doesn't bring it into the standards.
Yeah, it's good. It's lightweight and pretty good strength. So it might be, again, another option and another tool in the toolbox, you know, for municipalities. As it meets all the ASTM and AWWA standards. So that's about it. So a lot of potential cases. Hopefully some of these will come to fruition and we'll finish a couple of them, like Warren's case. So our next meeting will be on February 20th at 1:30. The link will be through the MAG website, and it'll be a virtual meeting.
Thank you. And those that don't attend it can always watch it on YouTube later. You guys have a lot going on, Jim. Thank you for the update. Let's move on to the asphalt materials and concrete working group. Is there anything we need to bring up on that? That would be Greg. Brian's out, or Jeff. All right, hearing none. If we have to, we can circle back to that. We're going to go back to the outside of right-of-way working group. Peter.
Yes, and we can scroll down. We had our meeting on the in January, the Thursday. What I'd like to scroll down to is we've talked about the other cases, thermoplastic, the ones that are there. The potential new cases, really, they aren't potential. We're really moving forward with some of those. The spillway and sedimentation trap detail, working with Eric Bonds of Tempe. We didn't have it in time, but about the day after that, we do have a draft that we'll be discussing at the next meeting. That's the tie-in between the street and the sedimentation basin that's already in mag spec. We do have that case. Hopefully, we're going to be bringing that forward within, if not next month, definitely by the April timeframe. That one's going to be brought forward. The detention tanks are moving forward. Also, Keith Kesty with the City of Phoenix has been working on that with various people, ADS and some others. And right now we're just continuing to develop the details. He's been working very hard on the various types of systems, the corrugated metal pipe, the alternate material ones in addition to that. So we're hoping at the next meeting we'll see more details there. I think we're probably a couple meetings away from getting that in as an actual case. If you'd scroll down, we'll go to the other ones. And then the backfill is associated with that. Stormwater harvesting detail, City of Scottsdale. Tim Connor's been working that with Wayne Colbank, landscape architect, and we're hoping that they will have it for our next meeting, have a rough draft to be moving forward. The other ones, infiltration trenches, I'm going to try to get something ready, probably not by next week, maybe a rough for next week's meeting. The only other one I want to bring up is I'll probably try to be putting a list together, and that's down on the future where it says not discussed. And it's the moving of existing or previous mag specs and details into outside right-of-way, stuff that probably didn't belong in the blue book that probably should be moved now to, since we have a home for it. That would be like the sedimentation basin, which definitely is one that's really ripe for moving into the outside right-of-way document. I'm going to try to get a list put together so we can have a discussion. Our next meeting is next week, February 15th at 11 a.m. And it's, again, everything's been virtual. We'll continue that for a little bit. Maybe April we'll try to get together for one. Open any questions if anybody's got any.
Great, Peter. You have a lot on your plate, man. Great job, though. Great work. All right. We'll go ahead and move on to item 12, which is the staff report. That'll come from Gordon. Gordon, you want to go ahead and present the staff report?
Very quickly, the only thing I wanted to mention is that we are still looking for a vice chair. I've talked to some people, and Jean has also talked to some people. I did want to note that even if you don't feel that you could serve the entire 2 years as vice chair and another 2 years as chair, we could use an interim vice chair in, if there isn't someone who can commit that long. I know it is difficult. Most people don't know what they're going to be doing 4 years from now, so it's hard to make that commitment. But if you are available, we would like to have someone serve as vice chair. Gene brought it to my attention that we almost needed one for this meeting because he was ill a couple of weeks ago and wasn't sure he was going to be well enough to serve. So it's good to have that backup. So please, if you're interested or can do it, contact myself or Gene.
Yeah, as Gordon mentioned, even if it's just temporary, just this year, or at least we'll have somebody. You never know, I might win the lottery and won't be here next meeting. So hopefully I win the lottery and don't get hit by a bus, right? Anything else, Gordon?
That's all I wanted to mention now. Thank you.
All right. Please consider the vice chair, please. We're gonna need the support from you guys. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 13, general discussion. This is where I think I want to bring up myself. It was brought to my attention that, well, no, I'll save it for 14. I'm sorry. This is basically for topics of interest relating to the specifications. Standard Specification Detail Committee is not allowed to take any action at the meeting on this matter. It's just open for discussion. I can come right out of the bat and just say that we've kind of moved into McDOT's specification for contract specific language for rideability. I know early on when I came onto this group, I had mentioned the 12-inch straight edge and the joints and whatnot and rideability. Well, I've been working with John Shee, my team, one of my other civils, and we've kind of adopted what McDOT has for IRI and for rideability standards. So it's not something that we're looking at changing MAG per se, but it's definitely something that we're putting in our contract language to help us achieve that good ride, especially on a full reconstruct. There's no reason why we can't get a good ride on a full reconstruct. And we were challenged with the 12-inch straight edge and everything else. But that's what I have. That's just for information and discussion. Does anybody else have anything they would like to bring up? All right, hearing none, we're going to go to item 14, which is a request for future agenda items. I was talking with Gordon, and since this is the 2025 revision, potentially the whole book, we're looking at taking out some of the more gender specific language and going to more an example of like workmen going to worker, workman, workers, worker, and then foreman, supervisor. I would like to get that, Gordon, on for, I think we could probably do it under miscellaneous corrections. Do you think it's appropriate, Gordon, to put something like that under miscellaneous corrections?
I think it would be, as long as there's no confusion as to what the term means in a specific circumstance. So my point was that it would be good to make the change when we do a full new edition, if we are going to make that change. It was just something that when I was doing the proofing in Microsoft Word, it pulls up as, you shouldn't be using gender specific language. So here's some options. So that's why I brought it forward.
Well, and this would be a good opportunity to correct that. I agree with you, Gordon. So I would be open to putting that on under miscellaneous corrections. Anybody have any comments or anything on that item?
No, I think it can be a miscellaneous correction as long as we keep track of what the existing wording is and what's replacing it, so we can have a good idea of making sure there's not gonna be lost.
So for an example, one of the words that was in there was workmanlike, which is kind of confusing to begin with. Workmanlike, competent or skillful, would be the substitute.
Another thing that I could do is maybe when I do a find, like find these different terms and just maybe create a compilation of all those pages where it is so that members can see it in context and see if there's any areas where they think it's not appropriate to make a change or.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, I can do that.
My only comment on that is there's gonna be some words that'll be challenging. You mentioned foreman, for example, and replace a supervisor, but there's a difference between foreman and superintendent or project manager, all of whom could be considered supervisors of different forms. So I'm not saying we don't change them. I'm just saying that we'll need to be careful in those word replacements.
Observation. I appreciate that. We definitely should look at it.
Can I ask
Specific.
whose mandate? Is this a mandate that you have to do, or is this just a?
No, it's just something that was noticed during spell check, and it's something that if we're gonna change it, let's do it now if there's no support for it, there's no support for it. And it dies, it dies on the table, but it's something that we can definitely look at. And that's why we vote, right?
Just put it out.
And if there's if you'd like to make it a separate case, we could do that as well. So that, if you didn't want to group it in with other miscellaneous corrections, and you wanted to have some way of separating it from the things that are obviously typos, whatever, in case there is some objections or people aren't interested in making that change, that could be done too. So.
I like that, Gordon. I think we should do that as set it up as a different case. So it's not lumped in with the miscellaneous correction because it could get dicey. All right. Any other comments on this item from the group? All right, we'll open it up to number 15, which is comments from the committee. I got a quick comment. We've been seeing a lot of bore throughs lately. I don't know if the other city's been seeing that, but a lot of directional boring bore throughs. I had two in one day that were noticed during cleaning of the main line, which one of them, we can't get them to anybody to own it. So we're still working through that right now, but it's one of my comments. The other only comment was that we're adopting the mag rideability. Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up under agenda item number 15?
Mr. Chair, I've got one item.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Just related to current events, the Title 34 requirements that allow for alternative delivery procurements has a termination date in 2025, I believe, and there's cases being presented with the state legislature right now to extend that for 5 years. But if it's not something that you're already aware of, you may want to look into it and reach out and ask your representatives to support the extension of that. That would change our procurement ability from including job order contracting, construction manager at risk, or design builds to being 100% back to low bid environment only. So that's just something going on right now, and thought I'd mention it.
I appreciate it.
You want to look into it and consider whether you'd want to, not to advocate one way or the other. You can look into it and decide how you would like it to go forward or not go forward, and reach out to your representative.
No, that's very important. Thank you for bringing that up, Ryan. That's a big change when you take your procurement method down from those 3 options to 1. So yeah, definitely you guys reach out to your liaison and voice your concerns with that, or at least put that on the front of their mind that Title 34 is going to be coming to a reset. Ryan, is that?
Yeah, it's just one of the provisions within Title 34. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. Any other comments from the committee?
Hi, Mr. Chair. This is Bashir with City of Tepe. I got just a comment on the statement you made about the pour through conduits that's been, going through city-owned facilities.
Yes, sir.
Is there something MAG's going to do about that, or you just brought that up as a comment?
No, I just threw it out there as a comment. We're just seeing a rash of it. We're getting more and more of it. I think we just need to be more diligent in the potholing and the bore profiles and just as a whole, I think we need to keep closer eyes on it. I know we're having to fix this stuff ourselves, and it's taking a lot of resources.
Or you don't hold the utility owners accountable?
Well, we are when they're claiming it, and eventually risk management will circle back with that utility contractor eventually, but we're having to front the money up front, get a contractor, procure a contractor, do the repair, and it's a lot of resources going to this. So
okay, thanks.
all right, thank you, Bashir. We missed you all day.
Yeah, I apologize. I had to step outside. I have to go to another quick meeting.
All right. Well, we look forward to having you in the next one, Bashir. Thank you. I think that's about it. We'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned. Everybody